Tell us a little bit about what is the STAR method in interviews.
So STAR method, it's like the star signs. It's all astrology. No, I'm just kidding. That's an April Fool's joke. So STAR, what is it? What is it exactly? Well, it's a methodology for interviewers and interviewees to be able to conduct behavioral style interviews in order to understand better about the candidate and the role. And specifically, it's an acronym. So STAR is an acronym, and it stands for situation, task, action, and result. Think of STAR as a framework that you can use in order to tell a story about a particular question that an interviewer is going to ask you. So why is this important? Well, oftentimes interviews are a little open-ended, right? They're very subjective, and oftentimes we don't really know how to approach an interview because it can be really about anything, and you don't necessarily have a good North Star when it comes to how to answer interviewing questions. And likewise, for an interviewer, you have a resume in front of you, and you know what the job description is. How do you really tell if a person who you're interviewing is right for the job or is a good culture fit for this particular organization? Essentially, STAR gives us a framework or a methodology to provide what's called a rubric for candidates interviewing for that position.
Yeah, I think that's a very important way to create some structure in how you describe or even evaluate both ends of that engagement. I also believe that behavioral interviews can be enigmatic. So let's just try to add some description. Can you help describe what is a behavioral interview?
So a behavioral interview really is to understand how a person is going to behave in a role that you're interviewing for. And why is that important, or why do we conduct behavioral interviews? Well, the best predictor for future behavior is past behavior or past performance. And so really trying to understand, given certain situations, what the past behavior is or was for a candidate is the best way for us to determine what we can expect from them in the future on the job. And so how do you do that? Well, you can ask these questions that give you a sense of really how a candidate is thinking about situations in a job. And so some of these may not even be particularly job related. So, for example, some behavioral type questions might be, tell me about a time when you encountered conflict on the job. And so you might look at that and go, oh, that's a difficult question. How should I approach that? So you could say, well, I had an argument with my boss and we resolved it and it was all good. But really what happened there, right? And you can use the STAR methodology to really unpack that situation and tell a story about, what the situation was. We should break down what these different steps in STAR represent. And so when we say situation, really we're setting the scene or setting the stage for what was the context of this particular event or this story. And so you're giving kind of the context of your example. And so you could say, well, there was a situation where an employee wasn't performing on the job, and it was my job to talk to the boss about that. The next step is the task. And so the task can be really one of two things. It can be, what were you tasked with? What was your assigned task? Or given the situation, what task did you take on yourself as recognizing something that needed to happen? And so then you could describe, well, the task I took was, XYZ. In this conflict, I set up a meeting to discuss this issue, and I documented what some of the issues were in that particular scenario. Then next is the action. And so in STAR, then we explain what action did we take to address the situation. And so what's interesting about that is the task and the action can be quite different things, right? You may have been assigned a particular task, but you may have taken a different action. And so that's where you can actually show some initiative or show examples of where you took initiative given a particular task. And then finally, the result. And this is usually kind of the most important part. What was the learnings from that? And it doesn't always have to be, oh, I grew the company by 50%, or, I won X number of deals, things like that. And oftentimes behavioral interview questions can be rather challenging. Tell me about a time when project failed, and so walking through that, ultimately it ends in some kind of result. So that's where you could say, yes, this project failed. However, what we learned from this particular exercise was that we needed to do more customer interviews in order to get the product right. We didn't do enough interviews, and that was our finding. So in the future, what we would do is conduct a lot more interviews up front, something like that. And so that's how you break that down in terms of each of the steps.
I think that's a very good, structured, easy to remember breakdown of the steps. I really like how you specifically distinguish between tasks and actions and why that can be different. And the beauty of why it can be different because you take initiative. I really love that part of initiative.